We cannot start an equation wrong and end up with the right answer. There is a principle so simple that every school child understands it, yet so profound that most human beings spend their entire lives violating it. If you begin a mathematical equation with a false premise, every step that follows, no matter how carefully calculated, no matter how brilliantly executed, will carry that original error forward and multiply it. The answer at the end will be wrong, not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. And no amount of intelligence applied to the middle steps will rescue you from the catastrophe of a wrong beginning. This is not merely a principle of mathematics. This is the governing law of spiritual life. Srila Prabhupada states in the very opening of his commentary to Bhagavad Gita that the first and most fatal mistake a human being can make is to misidentify the self. When Arjuna sat on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and said, "I will not fight," he was not making a strategic error. He was making a metaphysical one. He had started his equation wrong. He believed himself to be the body. He believed his relatives to be their bodies. He believed death to be the end. From that false starting point, every conclusion he reached, his grief, his renunciation, his arguments about family traditions and social order, all of it was coherent, logically consistent, and utterly wrong. The Lord, therefore, did not address Arjuna's arguments. He addressed Arjuna's premise. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Bhagavad Gita 2.12. Krishna corrected the equation at the beginning. Until that correction was made, no further instruction was possible. This is the meaning of the second chapter. Before the philosophy could proceed, the foundation had to be right. Now consider the condition of the ordinary conditioned soul. We begin our lives, our plans, our pursuits, our relationships, our striving from the premise that we are this body, that we are the nationality, the family, the social position, the bank account, the reputation. We take the temporary to be permanent. We take the unreal to be real. We take the container to be the contents. And from that wrong beginning, we construct an entire civilization, an entire personal biography, an entire inner world, all derived from a false first principle. The Srimad Bhagavatam calls this avidya, nescience, and it does not treat it gently. Srila Prabhupada writes that a person who does not know his own identity is no better than an animal, because an animal also eats, sleeps, mates, and defends without any inquiry into the nature of the self. The animal cannot help it. The human being has no such excuse. The human form of life is specifically granted for this inquiry. To waste it without correcting the fundamental equation is described in the Bhagavatam as parabhavas, utter defeat. One who has not inquired about the self, who has not understood the goal of human life, who runs after the objects of the senses, that person is simply defeated. Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.5, in the words of Lord Rishabhadeva. What makes this especially grave is the nature of karma itself. Karma is not punishment. Karma is mathematics. Every action taken from a false premise produces a reaction that binds. The living entity performs pious acts, hoping to reach heaven. But heaven, as Krishna explains in the 8th chapter of the Gita, is still within the material equation. Having enjoyed that vast heavenly sense pleasure, they return to this mortal planet again, new one. The equation was never corrected. The goal was still sense enjoyment. The address changed, but the identity remained wrong, and so the cycle continues. Even religion, performed with a material motivation, begins from the wrong starting point. One worships God to get something, to cure a disease, to pass an examination, to find a spouse, to obtain wealth. Srila Prabhupada calls this the position of the artha and the artharthi, one who is distressed and one who desires material gain. The Lord accepts their worship, for he is compassionate, but the equation has not been corrected. They are still beginning from the premise that material happiness is the goal. And so the answer they arrive at, even after devotional effort, remains within the material field. The Bhagavad Gita classifies such worshippers as intelligent but limited. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Beeg 723. Not because God rejects them, but because the equation they began with produces only a limited result. This is where the teaching of the Bhagavatam becomes surgical. The Bhagavatam does not begin with ethics. It does not begin with ritual. It does not begin with social improvement. It begins with Satyam Param Dhimahi. I meditate upon the absolute truth. The very first verse establishes the correct premise. God is real. The material world is a transformation of its energy. The ultimate cause of all causes is personal, conscious, and good. Begin there. Everything that follows from that beginning, every act of devotion, every word of the holy name, every offering of a flower, every bow before the deity, becomes spiritually potent because it is derived from a true first principle. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to the first verse of the Bhagavatam that this work is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge. It is not merely information, it is the correct beginning. And from that beginning, the practitioner moves toward an answer that is also correct: liberation, love of God, freedom from birth and death. Now consider the chanting of the holy name in this light. When one chants Hare Krishna from the platform of material desire, expecting some worldly benefit, the chanting still carries value because the name is not ordinary. But the equation is still beginning incorrectly. When one chants with the understanding that I am an eternal servant of Krishna, I have forgotten this, and this name is my only means of remembering, the starting premise has been corrected. That chanting accumulates differently. It purifies differently. It carries the practitioner toward a different destination because the direction was correct from the first syllable. Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu did not teach us to chant for health, wealth, or heaven. He taught us to chant with the mood of a lost servant crying for reunion with the master. Trinad api sunichena, taror api sahishnuna, amanina manadena, kirtaniya sadahari. More humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, offering respect to all without expecting it in return. That is the correct beginning of Kirtana. That is the equation set up in the right way. One final dimension must be considered. The Bhagavatam, in its description of the sage Sukha speaking to the dying Parikshit, establishes that even a moment of correct beginning can reverse everything. King Parikshit had 7 days to correct the equation of his entire life. And because he began those 7 days correctly, placing himself at the feet of the spiritual master, surrendering his identity as a king, accepting himself as a student facing death, the answer at the end of those 7 days was perfection, liberation, love. Srila Prabhupada often said that this human life is the most important examination we will ever face. But before the examination, we must check the formula. If the formula is wrong, all the effort, all the austerity, all the charity, all the study will lead us back to the same place we started, or worse, to a higher platform from which the fall is steeper. The equation must begin correctly. The self is not the body. The goal is not sense pleasure. The Lord is not a means to a material end. He is the end. He is the beginning. He is the middle. When that understanding becomes our starting point, every step that follows will carry us not further into illusion, but deeper into truth. And the final answer, written in the ink of pure devotion, will be the right one. Hare Krishna.